What is the scariest thing in any game that is not a horror game? Story 1. In the Fallout games, where you pay attention to the environment and notice the subtle detail and stories found in the ruins and locked doors, ghouls in bathrooms thanks to people hiding in them when the bombs went off, audio logs and stories of the final days of humanity when people were at a breaking point, evidence of savage assassinations in bedrooms and offices. You don't tend to think about it when you're fighting ghouls and raiders, but pre war America was in many ways more horrifying than post war. Fallout gets really creepy, really often. That one vault in New Vegas with the plant life that turns people into spore carriers is so creepy to me, because now you're spreading it to the rest of the Mojave. Also, someone left the door to the vault open, implying the fate of the Fallout universe is all of humanity succumbing to a zombie esque plant life virus. Fallout is scary, man. Story 2. Redeads in Zelda. Ocarina of Time, my first time playing through my first Zelda game, I didn't know what to expect after exiting the Temple of Time. I take two steps into a destroyed post apocalyptic Hyrule castle town, only to find these zombie like creatures. My heart starts beating faster, and the Redead screech, Link freezes, and I jump. Not knowing what to do, these things are coming closer as I'm trying to run around, and then another one grabs me. I don't know how to escape, and seconds later, I'm getting the life sucked out of my character. One of my few non-fall game overs in my playthrough, but those are probably the only enemies and situations in Zelda games that scared me because it was so unexpected. Story 3. The Poltergeist from Prey. I'll always remember the first time I encountered one. A dark room, only lit by the electric sparks that came out of some broken machinery. The music is completely silent, until eventually you hear a creepy noise, seemingly out of nowhere, and in a language that you don't understand. Then this creepy music starts playing while this completely invisible thing creeps around you, until you suddenly get lifted into the air and take damage. I was actually a bit scared of that thing for some time. Story 4. These are all so good, but a few of mine. The vaults and other stuff from pre war American Fallout, looking at the lore, a lot of crap happened in He Placed Your Looting. Really, really messed up crap. Shadow Temple from Ocarina of Time. Ganondorf had nothing to do with it. The entire temple was a punishment for thieves, and yeah, anyone that's been in there knows how unpleasant it all looks. Majora's Mask. The entire game is one big, depressing, sad story as you try to save Termina from a giant moon. Dementors from the PS2 Harry Potter and The Prisoner of Azkaban. You have to learn the Patronus by passing a puzzle area. Problem is that there are Dementors that are constantly trying to suck your soul out, and they didn't do this in the movies, but the game acts like the book and replays Harry's father trying to protect him constantly. It's him, Voldemort. Go, go, it's him. And you want to get away from these Dementors and do the puzzle as fast as possible. X from Metroid. Fusion. You have a clone of you that's at 100% strength while you're at start game stuff and you are forced to hide. You hear that music and footsteps and you must hide. If you're found, run like hell. Story 5. Dead Hand. Zelda has some creepy monsters, nothing scary, but just sort of haha, that's spooky. Neat. Prior to Majora's Mask, the idea of something outright scary in a Zelda game was pretty much non existent. There was some stressful crap like time traveling 7 years in the future and finding the town destroyed and full of zombies, but nothing a kid couldn't comprehend and just think was cool, except Dead Hand. In the Kakariko, well, a mini dungeon in Ocarina of Time that precedes the Shadow Temple, there's some pretty weird, creepy crap. Basically, you get an item to find a secret door at the bottom of the well leading to flooded catacombs full of flesh piles, a giant floating skull that roams the hallways, and tons of dangerously thin pathways. Spooky, but not something too crazy for a family friendly game. Then you enter this one room. There are weird tentacle looking things sticking out of the ground. You go to attack one, and it grabs you by the face, and a hunchbacked, white, blood coated monster with no eyes and an unhinged jaw rises out of the ground and starts slowly chasing you. Here's footage of it. Story 6. I want to say a creeper, but actually, it was when I was playing Ark Survival Evolved. Basically, I was riding around on my iguanodon, and there was a level 150 Allosaurus. When it saw me, I thought nothing of it, and simply ran away knowing that it's stronger than me. I was faster. I managed to cross a large river, and it was getting dark. So I stopped to check my surroundings and to check my location, thinking I'd escaped the Allosaur. After I'd done all that, I planned my camera around to head back to my main base, except when I turned around, there was the massive silhouette of an Allosaurus launching out of the river at me. I screamed due to not expecting this at all and barely escaped. I've had creepers scare me just as bad, but thought I should share this one. Story 7. When I was a kid, my uncle gave me his old N64. I loved it, and it sat right next to my PlayStation 2. I had some of his old games, Mario, Majora's Mask, Star Fox, you name it. My grandpa would sometimes order N64 cartridges to add to my collection, and one game he got me was Kirby 64 The Crystal Shards. I was burning through the game like crazy. It was so much fun. The final world of the game is Ripple Star. The first stage of this world is bright and colorful like any average Kirby level. But then stage 2 came up and caught me completely off guard. In this level, the once happy and brightly colored village is now covered in shadow, and creepy ambient music plays in the background. To progress the level, you must jump down a well. This implies the inhabitants of the village would toss their dead into a well. Story 8. There's a realistic hunting sim called The Hunter. Usually, I'd go along a certain path up to the far side of the map where high-scoring games frequently spawned. Couldn't find any and began to meander. Did not know there were hogs and did not know they attacked. When they charge, your character automatically turns and faces it. I'm just minding my business and enjoying the graphics when they do a 180. A boar is 5 feet from my face, does the soundbite boar growl or roar, and runs away. I myself. Story 9. One time my big sis's friends were over. One of her friends is a game tester, and he was currently testing Pokemon, about 2 to 3 months before release. Since I liked Pokemon, he decided I could play it since that save didn't matter to him. He just so happened to have finished the league, and I got to explore Victory Road when I stumbled across the Zoroark encounter that brings you to En's castle. Fast forward to me, in the castle, entering En's room with headphones on. The song that plays in that room freaked me out to the point I couldn't sleep that whole night. It was scary to me. Lavender Town? That crap is overrated AF. En's room is the real scary tune in the Pokemon franchise. Story 10. Everyone knows how Roblox is a friendly kids game, right? Well, I went on because my friend told me about a scary Roblox game. It was fine at first. You were trapped in the woods and had to find your way to a circus, and your butt got saved by this clown. Then he rips you friends apart into shreds, eats them, and locks you in a cage, and you're forced to look at his face for like 3 minutes straight as he just repeats, precious, 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 all over again with a baby crying sound in the background. I shut my computer and had nightmares for weeks. Story 11. The dark rift and skies of Arcadia Legends still creeps me out over 15 years after I first sailed it. It's a pretty standard dungeon layout, basically a few corridors connecting a few nodes, but all the walls are a swirling dark storm. You're piloting an airship through this maelstrom, and at times it can get a bit claustrophobic. The music is also eerie and creepy. But that's not the scary part. The part that still gives me goosebumps, even now that I know the whole thing inside out, is when you get to the center of this storm. You emerge from the fog of a particularly long, stormy corridor, and suddenly everything is still and black and clear and open. I have never in all my life felt as vulnerable and exposed as I did the first time I sailed into the eye of the dark rift. Only the occasional glowing stone gives any point of reference, and even those look unnatural, emanating light, yet black as night at their core. You spend the whole level feeling cramped and uncomfortable amidst the storm. But it's the sudden calm in the middle of it all that still haunts me to this day. Even watching YouTube videos doesn't do it justice. You have to play it to fully feel its power. Story 12. I used to play the Futurama video game as a kid, and the first 3 levels always freaked me the hell out. The first level took place in the sewers, and what made that so scary for me was that the sewers were completely dark, except for the glowing sewage that was in most parts of the level and the fact that the sewer monsters would often break through walls and come after you. The levels after that, which were the subway and New York, scared me because 1. Both levels had a lack of light, and 2. The enemies in those levels were these weird mask-wearing guys that make squeaky boot noises wherever they went. And there's nothing scarier than just walking into an empty room and suddenly hearing that noise. Story 13, Endermen are terrifying. The fact that they can teleport, I've lost count of the amount of times I've been jump scared by one randomly teleporting into my house because it's raining. The fact that you can't look them in the eye because they'll aggro and attack you. how much damage they do, how they don't burn in sunlight, and how they're in every realm, end, nether, overworld. The sounds they make, especially their death sounds. Ugh, I don't care if Minecraft is a kid's game. Those things are nightmare fuel. Story 14. Ooh, I was just inspired by one with people mentioning redeads. There's this game called Empyrean, Galactic Survival. It's a sandbox shipbuilding survival game. You can find these abandoned structures, like the abandoned mine on the starting planet, and you go in and you hear this terrifying noise. I don't know how to describe it, but it's like a ghostly crying or something, and also sometimes the pitter-pattering of feet and an insect-like chirping. Then you find these tall zombie things called nightmares charging at you from around a corner, or scorpions if you hear the second. I have almost 800 hours in the game, and they still make me jump when they come around a corner, especially because they're really fast and can easily end you. Story 15. I have one. In Persona 3, 4, and 5, support characters will warn you not to linger on the floor of a dungeon for too long because something bad will happen. That bad thing being the Grim Reaper. You will know he's onto you by hearing the rattling of chains in the distance. He will chase you down and attempt to corner you. If he catches you, all you can do is pray that he doesn't instantly wipe your whole team so you can escape. The Reaper was most terrifying in Persona 3. If you were caught and he wiped your team, you could lose hours of progress depending on how risky you were, and save points were scarce as well, which added to the fear. On top of that, party members that were killed had a high chance of getting sick, which meant it would be a bad idea to use them again for a while. I actually enjoy being scared of the Reaper, because the fear is mainly psychological instead of a cheap jump scare. Story 16. I guess it's kind of an action horror game, so I can't say if it fairly counts, but the Shed boss from Splatterhouse 2 on Sega Genesis, the Blood Puppets boss. It's four mangled, bloody fetuses hanging from their necks by nooses that randomly drop down between four holes in the shed ceiling. They vomit acid onto you. Playing it even as a kid, I realized how messed up that encounter was. Even more so in knowing that you're fighting these things mostly barehanded as Rick, just punching them literally to pieces. Though you can also use hedge clippers or a chainsaw. That whole game is brutal as hell, most especially for its time. Other standout scary moments in it to me as a kid were fighting the Buggy Man, a tall mutated monstrosity that's composed of raw, bleeding muscle tissue with a burlap sack tied over its head and chainsaws attached to its arms in place of hands. And it just eats one pump action shotgun round after another, the strongest weapon in the game, which is rare and only holds a handful of shots. And finally, the tentacled horror that chases you across a lake in one level while you're in a little motorboat. Looking back at it, Splatterhouse did not mess around. And Splatterhouse 3's cutscenes are probably actually worse than most of what I described above. You're on a time limit to save your son and wife by a sprawling mansion filled with messed up monsters. You can usually proceed even if the time runs out, but doing so means you get to see your loved ones violently murdered by that level's boss monster in a cutscene. Keep in mind, this is on Sega Genesis. Story 17, The Silent Realms and Legend of Zelda, Skyward Sword. You get absolutely no gear. You have to go on a scavenger hunt through a creepy, dark version of the area you were just in, looking for tiny glowing things. There are huge armored things around, patrolling or just standing still, and you have to avoid them or they will chase you down and end you with one hit. And if you cross the line of sight of small sentinel creatures or accidentally step in certain patches of water, you wake them up. Or they just wake up because you've taken too long to find the next glowy thing. The only way to make them go back to sleep is to pick up the next glowy thing. There's one of these realms for each of the three major areas you visit, and they get worse as you go, and then you discover the fourth one. I made the mistake in the second realm of picking up the glowing object furthest from the goal last, which was guarded by the tiny sentinels. They spotted me literally a second after I picked up the last orb. And since there were no orbs left to collect, there was no way to put the armored guardians back to sleep. They chased me clear across the map, and it should be pointed out that one of the two types has the same full sprint speed as Link, only without the stamina meter. I barely made it, and when I encountered the next realm, I put the game down for 6 months because it literally made me hyperventilate, contemplating doing that again in the largest area of the map. Story 18. It's creepy but mostly annoying when you have a teammate who is always following you on the map and then just flat out sacrifices you to the enemy just so he can get a kill under his belt. And after you die in the game while waiting to respawn, he then starts chatting, telling you he'll go back to base and wait for me to respawn like this. Him. Thanks for the assist. I'll wait for you to respawn back at the base. Me. Just what the heck, man? We're supposed to be a team. Him. Exactly. You be the bait, and I'll go in for the kill. Honestly, if he were in a battlefield in the middle of a war, no one would want to be anywhere near him. Story 19, the library DLC in Metro 2033. It toes the line of horror, I guess, but it's a terrifying romp. It forces you to resist your first instincts. Instead of running or getting trigger happy, you need to stare down the terrifying beasts and pray that they'll respect your grit. My finger clamped the fire button too many times and got me destroyed. Story 20. 1. GTA San Andreas. I love that game, but when you're in CJ's house on Grove Scene, it still makes me nervous going upstairs and thinking you're going to see CJ's mom's ghost. I know it was a mod when she would come out and try to end you if you went up there. I never saw her because I never nodded at the game, but it still kinda unnerves me to this day, too. Red Dead Redemption. For me, it was walking around that abandoned mansion near the cemetery after you get rid of all those grave robbers. I just felt like something was gonna pop out. Never did. But still, it made me sprint out of that place after ending all those people every single time. Story 21. Not sure if this counts, but I just recently got Skyrim SE and was able to play with mods for the first time. I was looking for a cool house mod and downloaded Clockwork. I did not do nearly enough research because the gist I got from descriptions was neat Dwemer mansion with puzzles to solve. Unless creepy murder ghosts and artfully arranged skeletons will terrify you until you manage to eventually find your way out of the creepy murder tunnels. Also, so many Dwemer enemies that do not die. Story 22. Subnautica. The first time you go into the ocean that's deep enough, you can't see the bottom. The horror and wonder you feel every time a new biome is discovered. Let's not forget the pants crapping the first time you encounter a reaper and hear its roar. From then on, you think that's got to be the worst there is. You think wrong. Story 23. Has anyone mentioned the dark matter bosses from Kirby yet, or are those too easy at it? As for me personally, there was the climax of Pokemon X, where Lysander states that he wants to inject immortality into the protagonist after being defeated. Sure, it sounds stupid at first, but the more you think about it, the worse it gets. Story 24. I'm trying to think of something, but the only thing that comes to mind is the idea of being stuck somewhere forever. Sort of like that Cuphead journalist situation in the tutorial, except the answer isn't basically spelt out for you, or even points you in that direction, or implies there's anything you could do for experimentation. Also, the mask enemy from Mario World 2 and Doki Doki Panic. Story 25. Majora's Mask has already been mentioned, but I want to suggest Out of Town as an alternative. Aside from the obvious stupidity beneath the well, there is the Forest Temple and its music. It has the oppressive feeling of this place isn't meant for man, and is the first place in the game where you encounter horrors such as the crawling hands.